Hey all you ninjas out there, welcome back to DIY Nat. We're going to do part 3 of the cat tree project. I apologize for this taking so long. Got too many projects going at the same time, so I have to ask you to bear with me. Also, I'm going to make these segments a little shorter. The last two were pretty long-winded, so hopefully this will make it a little bit easier for you to view and absorb. So let's get into this. So we have a ladybug infestation, so if you see things flipping past the camera, that's what it is. First step in finishing the mock-up for the cat tree is to put the base together. I've got a sheet of 1/2-inch plywood here. It's BC grade. I put the good face down so that when we cut it, we don't get the splintering on the good side. And I'm going to lay this out to 6 feet long and 30 inches wide. Sorry. Now just take a straight edge and we'll connect our dots here. And we get the chalk line and we'll make the long mark. I used a blue chalk line there and it's hard to see with the sunlight right on it, so I went and grabbed the red one. Hopefully we'll get a little bit better mark on it. There we go. I just set this up here on the sawhorses so it was easier for you to see me marking it, but I'm going to set it down on the crickets to actually cut it. If I was cutting the sheet down the middle lengthwise, I would use 8 crickets so that both sides were properly supported. In this case, because the waist part is relatively narrow, I'm just going to use 6. If you're cutting a thinner material, you'll probably need to use a couple of more crickets in the middle here so that when you stand on it, it doesn't bend too much. But in this case, 1/2-inch, it won't deflect enough to make an issue out of it. Just want to check when you put it down and make sure the cut line is between the crickets so you don't cut through them. That's good. So we'll go ahead and cut that off. And as you can see, we got a nice safe cut on that, no binding on the saw, so that worked out good. Should have mentioned, don't forget to put your safety glasses on. Sometimes I forget because I have to wear reading glasses to do the marking and the closer work. Sometimes I forget to swap them back, so don't forget those. Now that I'm looking at this, I'm not sure 6 feet is quite long enough. So I'm going to leave that the full 8 feet for now. And once we mock it up a little bit more, we'll take a look at it and see what we want to do with it. I originally intended to lay some 2x4s flat underneath here to serve as feet, to lift this up off the carpet. But in looking at it, I'm not sure that's a good idea. When you join the 2x4s like this, first of all, it's going to take a very long screw to do so. And this is not very stiff. It's going to flex quite a bit, and I wanted the base to be pretty stable and not bend up and down to match the floor to bridge any irregularities. So I think what I'm going to do, rather than that, is I'm going to turn it this way and screw them together like that. And that should be much more stable. So let me go cut these. So we have 30 inches to start with. We're going to subtract 4 inches for the two-inch setbacks. And then we have 2x4s, which are 1.5 inches thick. So that's another 3 inches. Total of 7 inches off the 30, so the cross pieces will have to be 23 inches long. You can obviously cut these with your circular saw by putting your crickets on the ground and doing that just to save my back a little bit. I got out the power miter saw and I'm going to use that to cut them. And you'll see our crickets in action with the power saw, which I don't think we've shown before. This is a 2x4 I had laying around, so it's not full length. So I'm marking 23, 46, 69, and if this was an 8-foot piece, we would mark it also at 9 91. Is that right? That's not right, bad math. We would mark it 23, 46, 69, and 93. Safety's on, of course. That 2x4 had a little twist to it, so it actually bound up a little bit. That was that funky noise you heard. Yeah, always got to be careful with this stuff. Make sure your hands are well away from the blade and that you're holding the work down securely so that it doesn't jump out of there. I just dislodged a ladybug from my left nostril, so probably should have done this inside the garage. I didn't want to make a mess, but hey, I guess ladybugs like nostrils. So that's 4 cross pieces. Now let's think about what the long pieces are going to be. Since we're not sure how long we're going to end up making the bottom platform, I'm going to leave the long 2x4s full length. And once we get it mocked up and we figure out exactly where we're going to end up, we will cut it then. So what I'll do is I'll put one cross piece at a little less than 6 feet. So if we end up doing 6 feet, it'll be in the proper position. If we go beyond that, when I cut it off, I'll just add one down here. They don't have to be distributed evenly. Nobody's going to see it. It's the underneath part of it, so I think that'll work out fine. So let me assemble the frame, and then we will go from there. Also checking at this point to make sure that my subtraction was correct, my arithmetic. There should be 2 inches on each side, and that's what we have, so actually did the numbers right. And as far as putting this together is concerned, just going to use some 3.5-inch screws with a Torx head on them and connect it as if you were framing a wall. Normally it would be a good idea when you're screwing near the end here to pre-drill the holes, but these 2x4s are not really very dry, so they tend not to split very much. So I'm just going to skip that step. But if you had older, drier 2x4s or they'd been sitting in the house and acclimated, you probably want to drill some pilot holes down through there so that you don't split out the ends of the It'll be a horror film next Halloween, When Ladybugs Attack. So what we'll do is we'll measure from the far end. Now we think we're going to cut this plywood off at 6 feet, in which case I want to pull this back from the end to give a setback just as we did with the sides. 2 inches on that end, 2 inches on this end. That would mean the outside of this side of this would have to be at 6 feet minus 4 inches, so that is 72 minus 4, so that is 68. So let's make a mark at 68 inches. And we'll place this side of this there, so that if we do end up cutting this at 6 feet, we'll have 2 inches setback at each end. By the way, the setback, the purpose of that, it's the same thing as you have on your kitchen cabinets. It's called a toe kick. This way, if you walk up to it and you accidentally move your foot too far forward, you don't bash your toes on the edge of it. So that's what that inset is for. Usually I square these up by eye, but if you haven't done this very much, it's handy to put a square on there and just get rid of the gap there. That's why this face will be perpendicular to this face. You won't have any twisting of the cross member. So we'll measure 68 inches on this side, do the same thing. Yeah, I thought something didn't look right. I put it at 69 instead of 68. So I'll have to move that and fix it. Let's go ahead and do this side while we're at it. And I'll move back over there. When I marked this, it was on the wrong side of the 2x4. It should have been over here, the mark. So I realized then that I had made a mistake on that. So we'll put this one in, and then I'll go over and straighten the other side out. Screws are going to be hot when you remove them from the friction, so be careful when you take them out. Don't grab them too far down. Just grab them by the head. I'm going to scrub out the mark that I made before so there's no confusion. Just make sure that it's obvious that that is an error. So of course I picked up the one that I took out and it was hot. Should have set them aside till they cooled off. We have 68 inches. I'll distribute these relatively evenly between the two. So because we're using two across here, that means this is split into thirds. Divide 68 by 3. Yeah, you roughly get 23. So what I'll do is I'll come in this end for 23 and that end for 23. They won't be distributed completely evenly, but I'm not going to bother doing the math and worried about fractions. So we'll just come in 23, and that'll be the center line of that. I should not have done what I just did. I was holding this like this. If the screw hit a knot or something, it might bend and come out, either the side or the top. So I could have skewered myself. You want to make sure that your hand's well out of the way. It's well beyond the length of the fastener when you're doing this, especially if you're using a nail gun, because it's very easy to for the nails to hit something and deflect out and go right into your hand. We are going to pre-drill the holes through the plywood into the base. That is a little tricky because if you put the base on top of this, it's hard to see where the members are underneath. So I'm going to show you a little trick on how to do this. First of all, let me get this out of the way, and then we're going to flip the plywood over. So now I have the good side up. What I'm going to do is position the base with the proper setbacks, the 2 inches on each side on the end, and then trace around it. You don't want to do this method if you're going to stain this, because then you would have to sand out all the pencil lines. Actually, we're going to paint this, and also this is going to be covered by carpet or some kind of fabric that the cat would like. So there's no harm in doing it this way. Also, when you drill a hole, as you know, I am in fact bleeding. I also have about 20 ladybugs in my shirt. When you drill a hole through a piece of wood, the back side of the hole will break out a little bit. As a matter of good practice, I would rather have the top face, the good side, pristine. Even though we're covering it, it's just a good habit to get into, so it's better in this case to drill from the top down through the bottom. So let's position this 2 inches from the end. pretty good. And then 2 inches along the side. I'll have to go back and forth and adjust that, because when you move one side, it affects the other side. We're out of square slightly. We got more than 2 inches on that corner and less than 2 over here. So the whole thing is racked just a little bit. So let me show you what we're going to do in order to deal with that. I'm going to flip this around and do it over here so you can see a little better. I'm going to establish this corner 2 inches from each side and then go down the side and get that set. Then what I'll do is I'll rack this a little bit so that we get it where we want it. So, all right, so that's 2 inches in there. That's 2 inches there. And we'll take a clamp. Stick it there. And we will tighten that up. Do the same thing. Come into, and we'll pull this back this way so that we get that rack out of that. Where are we at here? It looks pretty good. Yeah, see, we got 2 1/4 there. This is not critical, obviously, but again, as a matter of good practice, I want to do it this way. This next maneuver really needs 3 hands, but we'll manage somehow. Actually, what I want to do is make a mark at 2 inches. So I don't have to try to measure this and move it at the same time. As I said, we'll just go around the inside here and do the outside as well. We'll unclamp it. We should be able to see where all our lines are to drill from. So I'm going to put a hole, maybe 3 of them, 3 screws across the cross pieces, and on the long pieces, maybe 1 in the corner, and every 16 inches or so. If you want to, you can measure it. I'm not concerned about making it perfect, so I'm just going to eyeball it. We want to avoid putting screws at the intersections because they may go through and strike the screws that are holding the cross pieces onto the bottom frame. So just avoid that, and everywhere else is fine. If this was in fact a piece we were going to stain, we would want the holes to be symmetrical, spaced properly, and consistent all the way down the piece. Otherwise it wouldn't look that great. So in this case we don't have to worry about it, but just something to think about. So I flip this over. What we'll do is we'll clamp this back on, and then we will line it up, push it so that it's square, and then we'll flip it back and drive the screws to it. Providing, of course, that I can find the tape measure, which I had 12 seconds ago. There we go. Hopefully, if you're going to leave comments, please don't leave any comments about my mental state, because I'm already fully aware of the fact that dementia is setting in. Wonder how many ladybugs I've eaten so far today. I may only need a very light dinner. So as before, just set everything back 2 inches. Looks like that previous effort to align that has racked us back to where it should be a little bit, because it's almost perfect. So that makes life a little easier. I don't have to keep tugging on it. These screws are actually a little bit too long than we need. They're 2 inches long. The general rule of thumb is that you make the screw 3 times the thickness of the thinner piece you're screwing through. So this is 1/2 inch plywood, so 1.5 inches would have done just fine. And if I was buying a box of these, I would have just got 1.5 inches. But for this particular case, I had these laying around, so I'm just going to use these. I don't think you need to watch me screw for 15 minutes. That kind of is a horrifying thought. So I'll just jump ahead here with the video. And I don't know if you can see that on camera, but the screws have a little protrusion underneath the head, which serves to drill around a little bit so they countersink themselves. If you didn't have this kind and you wanted to make sure the screws were flat, you'd have to put countersinks on all the holes, but these are very convenient for this purpose. After I put the screws in this one end, I should have gone to the other end and made sure that the 2x4s were aligning with the marks that I had made. They in fact are not. So something was still racked a little bit. So I should have done that first, and what I ended up having to do is take quite a few screws out so I can go back down there and fix my error. Just something to be aware of. So that's the base pretty much. Once we mock up the rest of it, we'll cut this to the length we desire. Depending on where the branches land that are going to hold the whole thing up, we may want to put some more cross pieces in here so that the bottom of the branches land on a more solid support. But we don't know. It may not be necessary, so we'll see with that. Also, this has gotten fairly heavy, which is good. That'll give us more stability for the tree when the cat is climbing up and down it. So we're done with this, and the next step is to continue our mock-up and cut all those branches to length.